the wizard's kitchen. As I closed my eyes, a heavy stillness settled over me, my breath shallow with anticipation, waiting for something magical to sweep through my soul. I yearned for a spark, a whisper of enchantment to lift the weight of my despair. But there was nothing. No tingling warmth crept across my skin, no waves of radiant energy surged within me. I felt utterly unchanged, sad, tired, and miserable, as if a grey fog clung to my heart. Disappointed, I opened my eyes, the world around me unchanged yet somehow heavier. I was enveloped by an oppressive darkness, a void so profound it seemed to swallow light itself. There was nothing in front of me, nothing behind me, nothing above or below, just the deepest, darkest black, like an endless abyss, pressing against my senses. Confusion churned in my chest, my mind grasping for meaning. I could move my body, my arms and legs slicing through the emptiness. It was like floating in a bubble, weightless yet trapped. I tried walking, each step tentative, but there was no way to tell if I was moving. No pressure underfoot grounded me, no colors pierced the gloom, no background offered perspective. Am I moving, I thought, the question echoing in the hollows of my mind. I don't know. Just as panic began to claw at my throat, a faint sound pierced the silence. Footsteps, distant and rhythmic, like a clickety-clack echoing across an unseen floor. It was Ogleflow. His form materialized in the void, but the absence of context made it impossible to judge his approach. Was he growing larger or drawing closer? He moved with peculiar grace, his silhouette performing a whimsical jig while walking. 2 long strides, then 2 short ones, his heels clicking sharply, followed by 2 hops to the right, then 2 to the left. His cane spun in a flourish, arcing out in front of him before snapping to his side, the motion repeating with theatrical precision. "Let the fun begin," he shouted, his voice booming through the emptiness as he came to a halt before me, his presence a vibrant contrast to the desolate void. "Well, young fun, what do you think? Is it all you dreamed of?" His eyes gleamed with mischief, his tone teasing yet expectant. "It's nothing like I thought," I replied, my voice small and trembling with frustration. "It's just black. There is nothing here. I want to go home." I stamped my foot, the gesture futile in the weightless dark, a flare of anger heating my chest. I laugh about it now, the naive notion that Ogleflow, this enigmatic figure, would bend to my childish command. Before I could speak again, Ogleflow swiftly pressed his hand over my mouth, his touch cool and firm. "Be careful what you say here," he warned, his voice low and urgent. "Dreams really do come true, but nightmares live here too." He removed his hand slowly, his gaze darting around as if expecting shadows to stir. I stood frozen, my pulse quickening, as Ogleflow began to explain, his arms sweeping in large, exaggerated arcs, his movements brimming with theatrical energy. One eye remained fixed on me, sharp and unyielding, while the other roamed restlessly, searching for something unseen lurking in the dark. "We are on the outer edge of your mind, young fun," he said, his voice a blend of reverence and caution. "What you can imagine, you can create here. We are going to explore the very depths of your creations. Who knows what already lives here, in the darkest corners of your mind? We will have to be very careful. The deeper we go, the better, or worse, it will get. Maybe both. But one thing I can promise, it will be an adventure." His words hung in the air, heavy with possibility, stirring both dread and curiosity in my heart. Ogleflow continued, his tone growing more animated. "There are many rooms to explore, many boxes to open, many secrets to be revealed. We will search them all. We will find my joy, and your parents, of course. Are you ready, young fun? Are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime?" His eyes sparkled with a wild, infectious enthusiasm, his cane tapping the unseen ground for emphasis. It was strange, this warmth blooming in my chest, that I felt comfortable with Ogleflow. Despite the eerie void, I felt safe, anchored by his unshakable confidence. He seemed so sure of himself, his attention wholly focused on me in a way I hadn't felt in ages. If ever. No one had paid me this much mind, seen me so clearly. So with a tentative nod, I agreed, my heart flickering with the first embers of hope. Ogleflow stood upright, his posture regal and commanding, both hands resting firmly on the polished ebony cane that gleamed faintly in the void. His piercing eyes locked onto mine, their intensity sparking a flicker of warmth in my chest, as if he saw something in me I couldn't yet see in myself. "Then let the fun begin," he said, his voice rich with anticipation, resonating through the endless dark, like a bell tolling in a forgotten cathedral. A warm, loving sensation blossomed within me, soft and radiant, like sunlight breaking through a storm. It was the kind of feeling I imagined a mother or father might stir when gazing at their child with pride. A glow of unconditional acceptance I hadn't experienced before. I liked it. I liked it a lot, the way it wrapped around my heart, soothing the ache of loneliness. Ogleflow stretched out his hand, his fingers long and graceful, and I placed mine in his, my small palm enveloped by his steady grip. Together, we walked into the darkness, the void swallowing our steps, yet his presence anchored me like a lighthouse in a tempest. A question burned in my mind, insistent and restless, so I tilted my head up to Ogleflow, his silhouette towering against the inky expanse. "Where are we going?" "There is nothing here," I asked, my voice trembling with both curiosity and unease. "Nothing here?" Ogleflow's tone was laced with playful incredulity. "Why, young fun, everything and nothing exists here. Does a flower not bloom in the summer only to die in the winter? Both states of being are true, are they not? Life and death are the same. Everything and nothing are the same. One cannot be without the other. Non-existence can't exist without their first being existence. Non-existence is still existence. There is always something here. Do you understand, young fun?" His words danced in the air, each one heavy with paradox, like riddles carved in ancient stone. "Not really," I admitted, my brow furrowing. What I really meant was not at all. Even as an adult, I would wrestle with the cryptic messages Ogleflow would weave, his ideas threading through my mind like threads of starlight, both luminous and elusive. It made sense, but at the same time it made no sense at all. That was Ogleflow, a contradiction of everything I thought and believed to be true, a living enigma who turned the world inside out with a single phrase. "What we need, young fun, is a bag of tricks," Ogleflow declared, his voice brimming with mischief as if he were proposing a grand caper. "Where can we find that?" I asked, my curiosity piqued, my voice small against the vastness of the void. "The wizard's kitchen, where he cooks up his spells," he replied, his words conjuring images of bubbling cauldrons and arcane flames. "Will he cook us a bag of tricks?" I asked again, picturing a kindly wizard tossing enchanted ingredients into a pot. Ogleflow grinned, his teeth flashing in the dim light, his eyes glowing with a look of mischief that sparkled like embers in the dark. "No, we are going to steal them, young fun. The wizard would never let it go willingly." "But isn't that wrong?" "Auntie M says stealing is bad," I protested, my moral compass spinning wildly in this strange new world. "Didn't I just get through explaining that one thing can't exist without the other? Stealing is also not stealing. So if you don't steal, you're still stealing," Ogleflow countered, his logic twisting like a river through a canyon. At this point, I feel the need to try and explain Ogleflow's thought process as I understand it. Imagine that everyone owned something, and that was that. A world of clear boundaries. Then, one day, someone stole from someone else, and they called it stealing, a word sharp and accusatory. Once stealing came into existence, its opposite was born. Not stealing, a quiet virtue defined only by the absence of theft. Not stealing would not exist without their first being stealing, just as shadow cannot exist without light. I know how this sounds, like a knot in the mind, but that's how his mind worked, a tapestry of opposites woven into one. Ogleflow rubbed his chin, his fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw, and looked around, his gaze sweeping the formless dark. "There is a door around here that will take us to the wizard's kitchen," he mused, his voice tinged with certainty. I looked left, then right, my eyes straining against the oppressive blackness. "There it is," I shouted, my heart leaping as a faint glow pierced the void to my right. Surrounded by a soft, ethereal light, stood a large wooden door carved from oak, its surface rich with the deep, earthy scent of ancient forests. We moved closer, our steps silent in the weightless dark, and stood before it. It was magnificent, a masterpiece of craftsmanship. The door was covered with intricate carvings of celestial bodies, the sun blazing in golden glory, the moon a serene crescent, and stars twinkling in delicate relief. Around the edges, the 12 signs of the zodiac curled in elegant arcs, each symbol pulsing with an otherworldly energy. It's amazing, I thought, my breath catching in my throat. I had never seen anything like it, its beauty a stark contrast to the barren void. There is no doorknob, I said, looking up at Ogleflow, my voice tinged with confusion as I scanned the seamless wood. He sighed, a soft, exasperated sound, and pinched his temple between his forefinger and thumb, as if my words pained him. "What have I just been saying?" he whispered, his tone a mix of patience and playful reproach. I stood staring at him, my shoulders lifting in a helpless shrug, my mind blank. Opposites both exist. If there is no doorknob, there must be a doorknob. "Look again," he urged, his voice gentle yet insistent, like a teacher guiding a reluctant student. I turned and faced the door once more, my eyes tracing its intricate carvings, but I still couldn't see a doorknob. A familiar sense of embarrassment washed over me, hot and prickling. The kind you feel when you're asked a question in class, you get it wrong, and the teacher says, "Try again." You have no answer to give, and everyone is just staring at you, some beginning to snigger. You know that feeling, or at least you can imagine it, the weight of expectation pressing down like a storm cloud. Ogleflow placed his hand on my head, his touch warm and steady, and gently pushed it to one side. Suddenly, I saw it. The doorknob, carved from oak, its grain blending so perfectly with the door that it was invisible when viewed head-on. But from this new angle it stood out clearly, a subtle marvel of design, its contours catching the faint glow. You might say it was just an optical illusion, that it had been there all along, hidden by clever craftsmanship. Ogleflow, however, would say all of life is an illusion. It just depends on your point of view. One man might say something doesn't exist, while another might claim it's as plain as the nose on your face, and both could be right, depending on where they stand. I placed my trembling hand on the oak doorknob, its smooth, cool surface grounding me momentarily as I looked up at Ogleflow, his silhouette framed against the faint glow of the celestial carvings. His eyes gleamed with an unspoken promise of adventure, both thrilling and unnerving. "Open it," he said, his voice a low, commanding murmur that seemed to ripple through the void. I turned the doorknob, the wood yielding with a soft click, and pulled hard on the door. It was heavy, its ancient weight resisting my efforts as if reluctant to reveal its secrets. Slowly the door began to open, creaking and moaning like it had been woken from a deep, restful sleep, the sound reverberating through the darkness like the groan of a slumbering giant. I pushed the door all the way open, my arms straining, and stood at the threshold peering into the abyss beyond, my breath catching in my throat. "There's nothing here. It's so dark, I can't see anything," I said, my voice small and quivering, swallowed by the impenetrable blackness before me. As I spoke, my words echoed back to me, overlapping each other again and again, a haunting chorus that twisted and tangled in the air, as if the void itself were mocking me. "There's a hole here," I added, leaning forward cautiously, my curiosity battling the growing unease in my chest as I strained to pierce the darkness. "Hello?" I shouted, my voice bold yet trembling, hoping for a response to anchor me in this surreal emptiness. Once again, my voice echoed back, the sound bouncing endlessly in the unseen depths. Then, far below, I glimpsed it, a pinprick of light, faint and flickering, like a solitary star in an endless night sky. "Look, there's a light," I said, my heart lifting with a spark of hope, my eyes fixed on that distant glow. Suddenly the world tilted, and I felt myself falling. Ogleflow had pushed me into the hole, the betrayal swift and disorienting. My stomach lurched as I plummeted, the void consuming all sense of direction. I couldn't tell which way was up, which way was down, or which was left or right. I only knew I was falling because of the sickening sensation in the pit of my stomach, a churning dread that gripped me like icy fingers. There was no rushing wind to mark my descent, no sound other than my echoing screams, shrill and frantic, swallowed by the endless dark. The pinprick of light danced erratically, but I realized it was just me tumbling and twisting, my body spinning uncontrollably, unable to right itself in the weightless chaos. As I fell screaming in terror, my eyes caught Ogleflow falling alongside me, his demeanor a stark contrast to my panic. He looked completely relaxed, as though he were lying on a park bench beneath a summer sky. One leg was stretched out straight, the other bent at the knee, pointing upward with casual elegance. His body remained horizontal, defying the chaos, his head supported by his right arm as if propped on an invisible pillow. His hat tilted slightly to one side, secured with an effortless charm, ensuring it would not fall from his head. He was totally at ease, not worried in the slightest, his calm presence both infuriating and surreal amidst my terror. "Help me," I cried, my voice raw with desperation. "I'm falling." My arms and legs flailed about desperately, clawing at the empty air, searching for something, anything, to grab hold of. I was in a complete panic, my chest heaving with ragged breaths. My heart pounded like a bass drum, thumping hard within my chest, each beat a thunderous echo of my fear. Blood rushed through my arteries, a torrential surge pumping oxygen into my muscles in a futile attempt to save me from destruction, my body trembling with the primal instinct to survive. Ogleflow, seemingly unbothered, started poking me with his cane, the polished wood jabbing at my side with playful insistence. "Stop waving your arms and legs about, you look ridiculous," he said, his voice tinged with amusement, as if my terror were a mere spectacle. "Help me," I screamed again, my plea a piercing wail lost in the void. "Spread your arms and legs out, like a starfish," Ogleflow shouted between bouts of laughter, his voice buoyant and infuriatingly cheerful. It took me a while to calm down, to stop grasping at the nothingness and follow his instructions, each poke of his cane a sharp reminder to focus. All the while, he kept prodding me and yelling, "Small movements. Control the descent." His words cut through my panic like a lifeline, urging me to find order in the chaos. Finally, I aligned my body parallel to his, my limbs trembling as I forced them to stay still. A fragile calm settled over me, and I looked at him, my breath steadying. "I'm doing it. I'm flying," I said with delight, a surge of exhilaration bubbling up, the sensation of gliding through the void like a bird on an invisible current. Ogleflow stretched out his hand, his gesture deliberate, and pointed downwards. My joy quickly turned to fear, a cold knot tightening in my chest as I followed his gesture and looked below. The tiny pinprick of light beneath us had grown into a massive funnel, its gaping maw swirling with an ominous glow, and we were falling straight into it. We surfed along the rim like water spiraling down a plug hole, the surface gleaming with an unnatural sheen. The inside was shiny and smooth, a frictionless chute that amplified the sensation of speed, my body hurtling forward with terrifying momentum. It was exhilarating and horrifying all at once. "Hold on," Ogleflow shouted, his voice steady and commanding as he rode the twists and turns of the funnel with incredible ease, his body swaying gracefully, like a surfer riding a wave, perfectly attuned to the rhythm of the descent. I, on the other hand, spun uncontrollably around and around the perimeter, my body careening wildly, caught in the funnel's relentless pull. As the funnel narrowed, I picked up speed, circling faster and faster, the world blurring into a dizzying whirl of light and shadow. My stomach churned, a nauseating wave rising in my throat, and I started to feel queasy. The overwhelming speed and disorientation threatening to unravel me completely. Finally, the funnel spat me out onto a tiled floor, its surface as smooth as ice and cold to the touch, sending a shiver racing up my spine as I skidded across it at breakneck speed. My body collided with something soft, wet and smelly, the impact jarring yet oddly cushioned. It felt like old rope, sodden and heavy, reeking of mildew and neglect. Groaning, I checked myself for injuries, my hands trembling as they patted my arms and legs, expecting pain. I was shocked to find I was perfectly fine. Not a bruise, scrape, or even friction burn marred my skin as if the chaotic descent had been a fevered dream. I struggled to push my way through the strands of heavy, damp rope. their clammy weight clinging to my clothes, dragging at my movements like the tendrils of some unseen beast. When I finally emerged, panting and disheveled, I found myself standing in a massive kitchen area filled with all sorts of strange objects, each more unsettling than the last. It was a cavernous, malevolent domain, its very air pulsing with negative energy, a palpable malice that seemed to seep into my bones. Eerie shadows danced across the walls, writhing like spectres in a tormented waltz, where sagging shelves groaned under the weight of jars filled with grotesque specimens. Twitching, eyeless creatures suspended in viscous liquid, their forms distorted and nightmarish. Cobwebs draped between them like the vast sails of a ghost ship, bulging in an unseen wind, their silken threads glistening faintly in the dim light. The air was suffocating, thick with the stench of decay, burnt herbs, and a sharp metallic tang that coated my tongue and made my stomach churn with nausea. Massive cauldrons bubbled ominously, their surfaces roiling with dark, viscous liquids that emitted hissing whispers and low, guttural growls, as if the brews themselves were alive and malevolent. On countertops stained with ancient blood, their surfaces marred by deep, sinister streaks, oversized knives glistened with a predatory sheen, lying in wait for prey, their blades catching the flickering light with a hungry glint. Dark wooden cupboards, old and tired with ill-fitting doors that sagged on their hinges, skirted around the edge of the kitchen, their warped panels creaking faintly as if whispering secrets. The walls, formed from large light-colored stones, were blanketed in a thick black dust that clung to every surface, giving the room the appearance of a forgotten tomb. Down the center of the room ran a long oak table, its weathered surface spanning the full length, scarred and pitted from years of use. Beneath it, a shelf overflowed with loosely stacked iron pots and pans, their edges rusted and jagged, poised to cascade onto the floor at the slightest touch, their clatter a promise of chaos. On the table's surface, an array of glass beakers and test tubes of all shapes and sizes lay strewn haphazardly, their contents glowing faintly with unnatural hues. Some were on their sides, leaking viscous fluids that pooled in sickly puddles, while others were cracked or shattered, their jagged edges lending the space a chaotic, ominous energy that seemed to hum with latent danger. I emerged from between the strands of rope and looked behind me, my breath hitching as I realized I had been saved from a hard landing by a wet floor mop resting in the corner of the kitchen, its sodden fibers splayed like a grotesque nest. I followed the handle up with my eyes. Up and up it went, its length impossibly tall, disappearing into the shadowy heights above. A giant must live here, I thought, my mind reeling at the sheer scale of this alien place. Hesitantly, I scanned the four corners of the kitchen, each shadowed nook seeming to pulse with unseen threats. Every breath I took seemed to fill the room with the sound of a large, panting dog, ragged and amplified, as if the kitchen itself were breathing. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it trying to burst free from my chest, each thud a deafening drum roll that echoed in my ears, drowning out all else. I was afraid to take a single step, to make the slightest sound, my body frozen in a paralyzing mix of awe and dread. "Ogleflow," I whispered, my voice barely a breath, trembling in the oppressive silence. I waited on edge for a reply, every nerve taut, but it was difficult to hear anything over the sound of my own beating heart. Boom, boom, boom echoed through my ears, a relentless rhythm that seemed to shake the very air. Again I whispered, "Ogleflow," my voice a fragile thread, barely daring to disturb the stillness. Slowly I turned my head, my eyes darting carefully into every nook and cranny, searching the shadows for a glimpse of my companion. Quietly I whispered again, "Where are you?" Far too quietly to be heard. It was more for my own comfort, really, a desperate attempt to anchor myself in this nightmarish place. I was about to call out again, my lips parting, when I was grabbed from behind by the collar of my shirt, the sudden yank sending a jolt of terror through me. I was dragged under a kitchen cabinet, the rough wood scraping against my skin as I gasped. Ogleflow's hand clamped over my mouth, his grip firm and unyielding, stifling my cry. "Quiet," he said, his voice a low, urgent hiss that cut through my panic. "The wizard comes." The kitchen door burst open with a thunderous crash, slamming against a cupboard and sending a vibration through the room that rattled the jars and set the cobwebs quivering. I recoiled with fright, my body shrinking into the shadows as the wizard stormed in at speed, his presence a whirlwind of malevolent energy. He was thin and gangly, his sickly pale skin stretched taut over sharp bones, looking as though it had never seen sunlight, its pallor almost luminescent in the dim light. His classic wizard's robe, adorned with stars and moon symbols that shimmered faintly, hung loosely on his bony frame, the fabric swaying like a tattered shroud. A large, hooked nose jutted out over a pointed chin, giving his face a predatory sharpness, and his eyes, set close together, gleamed with a feverish intensity, crowned by thick, black, bushy eyebrows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. His movements could only be described as bird-like, quick and jerky, each step a twitchy dart, as if he were a hawk poised to strike. A mouse, roughly my size, its tiny claws skittering frantically, darted out from under the pantry door, a blur of grey fur racing to the middle of the floor. It paused, sniffing the air with twitching whiskers, searching the oppressive gloom for unseen threats. Then, just as quickly, it darted back, disappearing under the pantry door with a faint squeak, swallowed by the shadows. The wizard's head snapped around so fast it was a blur to the naked eye, his hawk-like features contorting with predatory focus, his eyes glinting with manic intensity. "Caracas!" he screamed, his shrill, piercing voice slicing through the suffocating air like a shard of glass, reverberating off the stone walls and setting the jars on the shelves trembling. Ogleflow dragged me further into the shadows beneath the cupboard where we were hiding, his grip firm and urgent, pulling me deeper into the cramped, musty darkness. The rough wood scraped against my back, and the faint scent of decayed herbs clung to the air, heightening my dread. Moments later, a large black cat sauntered into the kitchen, its movements sinuous and deliberate, exuding a quiet menace. Its sleek fur gleamed like polished obsidian under the flickering light, each step a silent promise of danger. "There is a mouse in my kitchen," the wizard screeched, his voice a jagged edge of fury as he pointed a bony finger toward the base of the pantry door, his robe swaying wildly with the force of his gesture. Caracas, the cat, settled down in front of the pantry door with a predatory grace, his sleek back turned to us, his tail flicking from side to side across the tiled floor in anticipation, each slow, deliberate sweep a countdown to violence. The faint tap of his tail against the cold tiles echoed in the tense silence, amplifying the knot of fear tightening in my chest. Ogleflow leaned close to my ear, his breath warm and tickling against my skin, and whispered, "He keeps his bag of tricks on the top shelf of that pantry." His voice was a conspiratorial murmur, laced with a reckless excitement that sent a shiver down my spine. "Are you kidding me? I am not going in there," I whispered back, just a little too loudly, my voice cracking with panic, betraying my terror in the cavernous kitchen. Ogleflow quickly clamped his hand over my mouth, his palm cool and firm, stifling my words as he stared me down, his eyes blazing with a silent warning. "Hush, you're too loud, far too loud," he said, his tone sharp yet hushed, urgency threading through every syllable. First his left eye, then his right, shifted toward Caracas, their movement deliberate and wary, like a hunter assessing a rival. He lowered his hand from my mouth to my chin, his touch gentle but insistent, and turned my head toward the cat. Caracas was staring in our direction, his dark green eyes glowing with an unearthly light, sharp and piercing against the inky black fur surrounding them. I was transfixed, frozen by his hypnotic stare, my breath catching in my throat as if ensnared by a spell. It felt like a challenge, a silent game of who would blink first, his gaze boring into me with a primal intensity that made my heart stutter. I let out a quiet sigh of relief, my body sagging slightly, when Caracas turned his attention back toward the pantry door, his tail resuming its slow, menacing rhythm. The wizard's footsteps grew louder as he stomped angrily around the kitchen, each step a thunderous echo that rattled the loose pans beneath the table. Muttering under his breath, his voice a low, venomous hiss, he cursed the elusive mouse. "Where is it? Where is it?" he moaned, his words dripping with frustration, each syllable a lash of his growing rage. He was searching through cupboards and across countertops, his skeletal hands tearing open doors and shoving aside jars with reckless abandon. Utensils spilled out across the kitchen floor, clattering in a chaotic symphony of metal and glass, their sharp edges glinting ominously in the dim light. Frustrated, he turned to the table and swept an empty beaker from the surface with a violent swipe, his robe flaring like a storm cloud. It crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 sharp pieces, the sound exploding through the room like a gunshot. Startled, Caracas jumped into the air, his sleek form arcing briefly before he scurried out the door, his claws scraping faintly against the tiles as he vanished. "Now's our chance," Ogleflow shouted, his voice a sudden burst of energy as he bolted from our hiding place, sprinting across the tiled floor with reckless abandon, his cane tapping urgently with each step. As he moved, Ogleflow's body and suit shifted colors, rippling like liquid light to blend seamlessly with the tiles, his form becoming a ghostly shimmer against the cold, slick surface. But the sharp slap of his shiny shoes echoed through the kitchen, a stark, betraying rhythm announcing his presence with every step, each sound a pulse in the tense air. He was almost at the pantry door, his silhouette flickering in the gloom, when the wizard's triumphant scream echoed through the room, a blood-curdling cry that froze my blood. The wizard brought his foot down hard against the floor, the impact sending a tremor through the tiles that I felt even from my hiding place. I gasped, holding my breath, my chest tight with dread, as the wizard lifted his foot and checked the sole of his shoe. His movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. He growled in frustration, his face twisting into a mask of rage, the star and moon symbols on his robe seeming to pulse with his fury. "Caracas," he bellowed, his voice a thunderous roar that shook the very walls, rattling the jars and sending a cascade of black dust drifting from the stones, the sound lingering like a curse in the malevolent air. I could see Ogleflow gesturing to me from under the pantry door, his silhouette a faint shimmer in the dim light, beckoning me forward with urgent, sweeping motions of his cane. I stood frozen, my body trembling as a bone-deep chill coursed through me, my muscles locked in place. I slowly shook my head from side to side, signaling my refusal, my eyes wide with dread as I mouthed the words, "No way." I emphasized the gesture with my hands, waving them frantically, desperate to convey that I wasn't moving, the grip of fear clutching me too tightly, like icy chains binding my limbs. Ogleflow's frantic gestures abruptly stopped, his silhouette stiffening. His expression changed, the mischievous spark in his eyes replaced by a flicker of alarm, and his pointing finger shifted, no longer beckoning me forward, but instead directing my attention to something behind me. His gaze locked on an unseen horror lurking in the shadows. I froze, my blood turning to ice, as the enormous black spider descended from the shadows above, its many legs clicking against the stone floor with a sinister, rhythmic precision that echoed like a death knell. The creature's glossy, bulbous body reflected the dim light, its surface slick and almost liquid, pulsating with a grotesque vitality. 8 jet-black eyes locked onto me, glinting like shards of obsidian, each one a pitiless void that seemed to pierce my very soul. Its fangs dripped with venom, the fluid sizzling faintly as it hit the ground, leaving tiny acrid wisps of smoke curling upward, the air sharp with the tang of poison. My chest tightened as fear gripped me, a suffocating vice that squeezed the air from my lungs. My breathing quickened, shallow and ragged, each gasp a struggle against the terror paralyzing me. My legs felt as though they were rooted to the floor, heavy as stone, betraying my desperate urge to flee. My mind raced, a whirlwind of panic urging me to run, scream, or vanish entirely, but I couldn't move. My body a prisoner to the spider's menacing presence. Every detail seemed sharper, etched in cruel clarity. The way its hairy legs twitched with predatory intent, the grotesque mandibles chittering as if tasting the air, their sound a grating whisper that clawed at my nerves. My heart pounded like a war drum, each beat echoing in my ears, a thunderous rhythm that drowned out all else. I clenched my fists, summoning courage from some hidden reserve, yet I felt small, fragile, as the spider loomed over me, a nightmare-given form, its monstrous shadow swallowing the faint light around me. I felt like I was moving through quicksand, My legs heavy and uncooperative, each step a laborious battle as I pushed toward Ogleflow, who frantically waved me on, his eyes wide with urgency. The spider's clicking legs grew louder behind me, a relentless staccato that sent shivers racing down my spine, each sound a pulse of impending doom. My heart pounded, its frantic rhythm threatening to burst through my chest, as I spotted Caracas re-entering the kitchen, his sleek body cutting through the chaos like a blade, his green eyes gleaming with predatory focus. Simultaneously, I glimpsed the wizard's foot rising ominously from the other corner of my eye, its shadow stretching across the tiles like a guillotine. The spider lunged, its fangs glinting with lethal intent, a flash of venomous horror in the dim light, but before it could strike, Caracas pounced with deadly precision, his claws pinning the massive arachnid to the tiled floor with a sickening crunch. I surged forward, adrenaline lending me speed, my legs finally obeying as I reached for Ogleflow's hand, my fingers trembling with desperation. His grip was strong, unyielding, and with one mighty pull, he yanked me under the pantry door, my body sliding across the slick tiles just as the wizard's foot slammed down behind us with a deafening slap that reverberated through the room like a thunderclap. The ground shook, a violent tremor that sent shockwaves through my bones, and dust rained from the pantry shelves above, coating my face in a gritty haze. My chest heaved, each breath a ragged gasp, as I lay in the shadows, clutching Ogleflow's hand, its warmth a lifeline in the chaos. My mind reeled, still trapped in the afterimage of the spider's glinting eyes and the wizard's towering rage. The wizard's enraged roar echoed through the kitchen, a guttural bellow that rattled the jars and sent a fresh cascade of black dust drifting from the walls. Caracas, triumphant, stalked off with the spider's twitching body in his jaws, his green eyes flashing with pride, his sleek form disappearing into the gloom like a victorious spectre. Ogleflow grinned down at me, his face alight with that infuriating, unshakable calm, as if we hadn't just danced on the edge of death. "Well, young fun," he said, his voice as calm as ever, smooth and teasing. "That was close, wasn't it?" The glint in his eyes sparkled with mischief, as if the terror we'd just endured was merely a thrilling game, his nonchalance a stark contrast to the frantic pounding of my heart. Ogleflow dragged me behind some bags of flour, their coarse, dusty surfaces scraping against my skin as we crouched in the suffocating shadows. The pantry door swung open with a loud creak, its hinges groaning like a mournful wail that echoed through the cramped space. The wizard stood in the doorway, his gaunt silhouette framed against the flickering light of the kitchen, peering into the shadows with a predatory intensity, his close-set eyes glinting like twin embers. Caracas emerged between his legs, his sleek black form slinking forward, the dead spider's legs protruding from the side of his mouth, their limp, hairy forms dangling grotesquely as his jaws worked with a faint, sickening crunch. "I think we have ourselves a flochi, Caracas," the wizard exclaimed, his voice laced with triumph, a chilling glee that sent a shiver racing down my spine. "Guard the entrance. Don't let it escape." I heard Ogleflow gulp, the sound sharp and involuntary, betraying a rare crack in his unshakable demeanor. Adrenaline was pumping through my body, a torrential surge that set my nerves alight, urging me to run. But there was nowhere to run to, the pantry a claustrophobic trap with walls that seemed to close in with every heartbeat. The wizard disappeared momentarily, his footsteps fading into the kitchen's cacophony, then returned holding an empty glass jar, its surface glinting ominously in the dim light, a vessel for some unspeakable purpose. Come out, wherever you are," the wizard mumbled, his voice a sinister sing-song as he searched through the contents of the shelves above, his skeletal hands rifling through jars and sacks with reckless abandon, sending clouds of dust swirling into the air. The sacks of flour suddenly parted, a violent upheaval that sent a puff of powdery grit into my face, stinging my eyes. Ogleflow shoved me aside, his push desperate and forceful, and I landed hard on the cold pantry floor, the tiles biting into my palms with an icy sting. Before he could react, the wizard blew a cloud of shimmering blue powder over him, the particles sparkling like malevolent stardust as they enveloped him from head to toe. The powder clung to his form, rendering his camouflage ineffective. his once shifting colors now a dull, exposed gray. With a victorious cackle that echoed like a hyena's cry, the wizard scooped Ogleflow up, his bony fingers clamping around him, and shoved him into the glass jar. The clink of glass a final damning note. "Look at this, Caracas, my very own Flochi," the wizard crowed, screwing the lid on tight with a deliberate twist, holding the jar aloft to admire his prize, the faint light catching the terror in Ogleflow's eyes. "With a Flochi, I can find my power and finally escape this wretched prison." His voice dripped with manic ambition, each word a step toward some dark destiny. I peeked out from around the corner of the flour sack, my heart pounding so fiercely it threatened to burst from my chest. I saw Ogleflow pressed against the side of the jar, his face strained but resolute, pointing upwards to the top shelf as he was carried off, a silent plea for me to act. The pantry door was still open, a narrow sliver of opportunity, and there was no sign of Caracas, his absence a fleeting reprieve in the suffocating tension. I thought I needed to find the bag of tricks. Taking the first step into the unknown is the hardest, a truth that weighed on me like a stone. I tried a few times to step out from my hiding place, unsuccessfully, my legs trembling as if rooted to the floor. The fear was sapping my energy, a relentless tide that drained my resolve. My knees felt weak, buckling under the weight of my terror, and my hands were shaking, their tremors betraying my fragile state. My eyes filled with tears as I started to feel sorry for myself, the sting of salt water blurring my vision. Why me? Why did I come here? "This is a nightmare," I cried, my voice a broken whisper that barely reached my own ears. I sat on the floor, the cold tiles seeping into my bones, put my head between my knees and sobbed, each wrenching gasp a release of the terror and shame consuming me. I felt ashamed of myself, a small, cowardly thing, unworthy of the adventure I'd stumbled into. I thought of the stories I loved to hear the brave fishermen tell, tales of huge storms and sea monsters, recounted with hearty laughter and fearless bravado, and they all laughed about it. And here I was, unable to put one foot in front of the other without shaking like a leaf, my courage a flickering ember smothered by fear. It's funny, but you can only cry for so long, and eventually I reached that point, the well of tears running dry. I lifted my head, the air cool against my tear-streaked face, wiped the tears from my face with a trembling hand, stood up, and peeked out from behind the sack. The pantry door was still open, its gap a faint promise of escape, and there was no sign of Caracas, the silence both a relief and a lurking threat. I took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of flour and decay, and mustered what little courage I had, a fragile spark igniting in my chest. "You can do it," I whispered, the words a quiet mantra to steady my racing heart. As I took the first step out from behind the sack, my foot trembling against the cold tiles, a mouse emerged from a small hole at the bottom of a wooden box, its tiny form darting into the open. I watched, breath held, as it reached the center of the floor, sniffing the ground in search of spilled grains and seeds, its whiskers twitching in the dim light. There was a sudden thud, a jarring sound that shattered the silence, and I drew back behind the sack of flour, my heart leaping into my throat. I took several deep breaths, each one a struggle against the panic clawing at me, before I found the courage to peek out again, my eyes wide with dread. Caracas had been hiding on the shelf above, his sleek form coiled like a spring, and had pounced on the unsuspecting mouse with lethal precision. I looked on in horror, my stomach churning, as he crunched its bones with a sickening snap. The sound sharp and final, and swallowed it whole, his jaws working with a grotesque efficiency. His green eyes gleamed with satisfaction, their glow cutting through the shadows, a chilling reminder of the danger lurking in every corner of this nightmarish place. "For crying out loud, what do I have to do?" I said under my breath, my voice a tremulous whisper, barely audible in the oppressive stillness of the pantry. Frustration boiled within me, a seething tide that erupted as I started cursing everyone and everything, my words a low, venomous mutter. I stamped my feet against the cold tiles, the sharp slaps echoing faintly, and shook my fists in frustration, my knuckles white with the force of my clenched grip. The wizard's shadow darkened the room as he appeared in the doorway once more, his gaunt silhouette looming like a spectre of doom, his presence chilling the air with malevolent intent. "Come out, Caracas," he growled, his voice a guttural snarl that rumbled through the pantry, sending a shiver racing down my spine. I heard Caracas scoot out the door, his claws scraping against the tiles with a fleeting, sinister skitter. The wizard slammed the door tight shut with a thunderous bang, the sound reverberating through the cramped space like a cannon shot, rattling the shelves and sending a cascade of dust drifting from above. I sank to the floor, my legs buckling under the weight of my relief, the cold tiles biting into my skin. "Thank God," I said aloud, my voice a shaky exhale, the words carrying the fragile hope of a momentary reprieve. Hesitantly, I stood up, my limbs trembling as I stepped out from behind the sack of flour, its coarse surface brushing against my arm like a whispered warning. There was a strange dim light emanating from behind me, casting long, distorted shadows that twisted and writhed, creating dark, creepy corners that seemed to pulse with unseen threats. As I turned to see where the dim light was coming from, my breath catching in my throat, I heard a voice say, soft and ethereal, "You don't want to go out there." I looked up, my eyes widening in awe. Hovering just above me was the source of the light, a small moon with a face, its surface glowing with a pale silvery luminescence that bathed the pantry in a ghostly sheen. Its eyes, soft and knowing, regarded me with a quiet caution. "You don't want to go out there," it said again, its voice a soothing murmur like the rustle of leaves in a midnight breeze. "I don't?" I asked, more as a question than a statement, my voice trembling with uncertainty, my heart torn between fear and curiosity. "No, you don't. Who knows what's hiding in the shadows, just waiting to gobble you up?" "Best you stay here," the moon face replied, its tone gentle yet insistent, weaving a spell of safety that tethered me to the spot. I looked back out across the pantry floor, my gaze darting nervously. Shadows were stretching out from behind every item stored there, like grasping hands waiting, begging to grab hold of me and pull me into the darkened corners of the room. Their inky forms seemed to writhe with a life of their own, each one a silent predator lurking in the gloom, ready to swallow me whole. "You're right, Ogleflow will come back for me. I will just wait here," I said, my voice small and wavering, clinging to the hope of rescue as I pressed myself closer to the flour sack, its dusty scent grounding me. "You must move forward," another voice boomed, its resonance filling the room with a commanding authority as a brilliant light now flooded the pantry, searing my vision with its intensity. I tried to see where the light was coming from, but it was too bright. A blinding radiance that stung my eyes and forced me to shield them with my arm, the glare piercing through my closed lids. The moon face started to move across in front of the bright light, its silvery glow a fleeting shield against the onslaught. As the light dimmed, I saw it was like the sun, and it also had a face, its golden surface blazing with fiery determination, its eyes fierce and unyielding. "Wait here, it's safe," said the moon face, its voice a soft plea, coaxing me to remain in the shadows. "Move forward," said the sun face as it emerged from the other side of the moon face, its tone a clarion call, urging me to action with unrelenting fervor. They circled each other, their orbits sending the room into a spiral of light and dark. From night into day and back again, a dizzying dance of opposites that disoriented my senses. "Wait here, move forward," was all I could hear over and over, faster and faster, the words blending into a relentless cacophony that pounded against my skull, each repetition tightening the knot of frustration in my chest. "Stop, enough, you are giving me a headache," I shouted through gritted teeth, my voice raw with exasperation, my hands clenched into fists as I fought to reclaim my clarity. "Isn't there an in-between phase?" I asked, desperation lacing my words, a plea for resolution in the chaos. The changes between light and dark became so fast that they were indistinguishable from each other, a frenetic blur that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Together, they created a new light, strong enough to see by, without blinding me, a harmonious glow that bathed the pantry in a gentle radiance. I lowered my arm, my eyes adjusting to the warmth, and looked up. Where the sun and moon faces had been was a beautiful glowing orb, its surface a perfect fusion of silver and gold. The two had become one, perfectly balanced. The light emanating from it was warm and welcoming, wrapping me in a cocoon of reassurance, its soft glow illuminating the pantry without casting harsh shadows. As I welcomed this new state of being, the orb shrank to the size of a golf ball, its light condensing into a radiant pinpoint. It flew down with a sudden, graceful arc and struck me between my eyes, a sharp, electric jolt that knocked me off my feet, sending me sprawling onto the cold tiles with a gasp. I often think about what happened to me in that moment, the memory vivid and profound, like a dream that lingers upon waking. The only answer I have is that the conflict raging inside of me became externalized, a tangible manifestation of my inner turmoil. It made it possible for me to see and understand how all things need and want to be in balance, a revelation that settled into my soul like a quiet truth. It's difficult to move forward when you are blinded by the light and when you can't see in the dark, each extreme a peril in its own right. The danger of tripping and falling is the same, whether in blinding radiance or suffocating shadow. Ogleflow would say opposites are equal, their dance a necessary harmony. When they become balanced, the way forward becomes clear, a path illuminated by clarity rather than fear or recklessness. The lesson was, don't charge ahead blindly and don't let fear hold you back, but find the equilibrium that guides you truly. I came to and shook my head, a dull ache pulsing at my temples as I blinked against the dimness. I had never been knocked unconscious before, and a moment of confusion gripped me, my thoughts swirling like leaves in a storm before my senses returned, sharp and vivid. I had no idea how long I had been lying there on the cold pantry floor, the tiles biting into my back. But I felt it wasn't long, the air still heavy with the same musty scent of flour and decay. I had changed. I don't know how, I just felt different. A quiet resolve stirring within me, like a dormant ember flaring to life, steadying my trembling limbs. I could hear the wizard moving around and grumbling in the kitchen, his footsteps a jerky, erratic rhythm that echoed through the stone walls. He shouted, "Where is it?" in a shrill voice, piercing and avian, a screech that grated against my nerves. He not only moved like a bird, his gangly limbs twitching with predatory precision, but he sounded like one too, his cries sharp and discordant, like a hawk circling its prey. The only light entering the pantry came from the gap between the door and the floor, a thin, wavering sliver of pale glow that cast long, eerie shadows across the cluttered shelves. I stepped out from behind the sack of flour, its coarse, dusty surface brushing against my arm like a whispered caution. I was surprised at how easy it was, my foot landing firmly on the tiles without hesitation. That first step, that had seemed so difficult before, an insurmountable barrier of fear, I now took without a second thought, a newfound courage propelling me forward. I walked to the middle of the floor, the cold tiles sending a chill through my soles, and looked up, my eyes straining against the gloom. Way up on the top shelf, barely discernible in the shadows, I could just make out the outline of a cloth bag with a drawstring dangling from the top of it, its silhouette a tantalizing promise. That must be it, I thought, my heart quickening with purpose. But how do I get up there? The shelf loomed impossibly high, a towering challenge in the claustrophobic pantry. One thing I was good at was climbing, a skill honed through countless adventures in the world beyond. I wasn't much good at anything else, my shortcomings a familiar weight, but I had never come across a tree that I could not climb to the top of, its branches yielding to my determined grip, or a cliff I could not scale, my fingers finding purchase in the roughest stone. I planned my route carefully, my eyes tracing every possibility with the precision of a cartographer mapping uncharted lands. There was a broom leaning against the shelves, its worn bristles splayed against the floor. I could shimmy up there easily, judging by the angle of the broom, its sturdy handles a ladder to the third shelf, 2 to go. There was a cloth bag hanging over the edge of the fourth shelf, its frayed fabric swaying slightly, and there was a tin I could climb up onto, its dented surface glinting faintly. I could stretch out my arm and reach the bag, then pull myself up to the fourth shelf. From where I stood, I could not see away from the fourth shelf to the top shelf, the path obscured by shadows. I will work it out when I get there, I thought, a spark of determination overriding my doubts. Shimmying up the broom handle was easier than expected. the smooth wood cool against my palms as I ascended with practiced ease, my movements fluid and confident. I almost fell when reaching for the overhanging bag, my fingers brushing air as I realized the distance had been hard to judge from the ground, and I was a few inches short, my heart lurching with the miscalculation. I had to make a jump for it, my body tensing as I launched myself forward. As I grabbed the corner of the bag, its fabric coarse and slippery, it slipped a little, and my heart jumped into my mouth for a couple of seconds, a breathless moment of panic as I dangled precariously. I steadied myself, my fingers digging into the bag's weave, and pulled myself up onto the fourth shelf, my arms trembling with the effort. The relief I felt was indescribable, a warm flood that washed away the fear, though I was sure the bag was going to fall from the shelf with every new hold I placed on it, its precarious balance a constant threat. There weren't many items on this shelf, just a scattering of dusty jars and crumpled sacks, and now I was here. I could not see any way to get to the top shelf, the path above shrouded in shadow. Pacing up and down did nothing to improve the situation. My footsteps muffled against the wooden shelf, each step a futile echo of my growing frustration. So I sat on the edge of the shelf, my legs dangling into the void below, wishing Ogleflow were here. His enigmatic wisdom would know what to do, his cryptic riddles a guide through the impossible. Ogleflow, I thought, a pang of guilt tightening my chest. He needs my help. I lay back, the shelf's rough surface pressing against my back, and covered my face with my hands, the weight of my inaction suffocating. I let out a cry of frustration, sharp and raw, as I sat back up, the sound swallowed by the pantry's oppressive silence. What would Ogleflow say? He would say opposites can both be true. You just need to look at it from another angle. If there is no way up, there must be a way up. Ah. Ogleflow, you make no sense at all, I muttered, my voice tinged with exasperation, his paradoxical logic a tangle in my mind. I lay back down, my gaze drifting to the bottom of the shelf above, its underside cloaked in shadow. I was on the verge of just giving up, despair creeping in like a cold fog. It's hopeless, I thought, the words heavy with defeat. But then I noticed that the shelf above didn't quite meet the wall in one corner, a narrow gap where the wood failed to align, a sliver of possibility in the gloom. I got up, my heart quickening, walked over and stood underneath it, craning my neck to assess the challenge. I can fit through there, I thought, a spark of hope igniting, but how do I reach it? I would need to be double my height just to touch it with my fingertips, the gap tauntingly out of reach. The stone walls of the pantry were rough and uneven, their jagged surfaces etched with centuries of wear, offering a glimmer of opportunity. I figured if I could force my back tight into the corner, wedging myself against the converging walls, and use the rough edges of the stones as handholds, I might slowly push myself up and through the gap between the shelf and the wall, each inch a battle against gravity. I slipped and fell 4 times, my hands scraping against the coarse stone, my knees jarring against the shelf below. Each failure a bruising reminder of the challenge. But on the 5th attempt, my muscles burning and my breath ragged, I finally made it through the gap, my body squeezing through the tight space as I clambered onto the top shelf, the triumph flooding me with a surge of exhilaration, the bag of tricks now within reach. There, lying before me, was the bag of tricks that I had worked so hard to reach, its worn fabric sprawled across the top shelf like a hard-won trophy. It actually had the words "bag of tricks" sewn into it, the faded golden thread glinting faintly in the dim light, a tantalizing promise of power. The bag was about the size of a bedsheet to me, its vast expanse overwhelming in my small hands, but would only be the size of a small purse in the hands of the wizard, a mere trinket in his bony grasp. I patted the outside of the bag, my fingers brushing against its coarse, dusty surface. It was flat and appeared to have no contents at all, yielding no telltale bulges or weight. I pulled the top of the bag open, the drawstring rasping softly, and peered inside, my breath catching in anticipation. Empty, I mumbled to myself, my voice a hollow whisper, disappointment settling like a stone in my chest, as the cavernous interior revealed nothing but shadow. I looked down at the light shining through under the pantry door, a thin, wavering sliver that cast fleeting shadows coming and going as the wizard passed by, his silhouette a menacing spectre flickering across the tiles. I could hear him fussing, his shrill voice punctuated by the clank of glass beakers, their brittle chimes mingling with the fizzing sound of mixed potions. A sinister symphony filtering through the thin pantry door, each note laced with the promise of dark magic. I rolled up the bag of tricks, its fabric crinkling softly, tied the drawstring to the opposite end with trembling fingers, and slung it across my back, its weight surprisingly light yet heavy with purpose. I had come all this way to get it, and I wasn't going to leave it behind, even if it was empty, its presence a symbol of my resolve. I had to help Ogleflow, the thought a burning imperative in my mind. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but I knew I couldn't do it from here, trapped in the pantry's claustrophobic gloom. I made my way down through the gap between the shelf and the wall, my back pressed against the rough, uneven stones, their jagged edges biting into my skin as I descended with cautious precision. Slowly, I climbed back down the overhanging cloth bag, its frayed fibers swaying precariously under my weight. Back and forth, I swung, building the momentum I needed to propel me onto the third shelf, each arc a heart-pounding gamble. With every swing, I feared the bag would fall from its perch and carry me to my death, the image of plummeting to the cold tiles flashing vividly in my mind. Finally, I slid back down the broom handle to the base, the smooth wood cool against my palms, my descent swift and controlled. As soon as my feet touched the pantry floor, the tiles icy beneath my soles, I ran to the door and peered underneath, my breath shallow and quick. All I could see was the wizard's feet moving back and forth as he worked frantically, building something on the kitchen table, his jerky movements casting erratic shadows that danced like malevolent spirits. The courage I had found to step out from my hiding place behind the sacks of flour and climb to the top shelf of the pantry had started to leave me, ebbing away like a receding tide. With the pantry door closed, I had felt safe making the climb to the top shelf, a feat I had accomplished many times for fun, the familiar thrill of scaling heights a comfort. But now, staring out across the kitchen floor, a vast, well-lit open area, its tiles gleaming with a cold, unforgiving sheen, I could feel the fear returning, welling up inside of me like a rising tide of unstoppable emotions, threatening to take control of my body once again, my limbs trembling with its insidious grip. I had visions of the wizard crushing me underfoot, his bony heel descending with merciless force, or Caracas swallowing me whole, his green eyes glinting with predatory glee, and big black hairy spiders cocooning me in a sticky web, their venomous fangs poised to slowly devour me, each scenario a vivid nightmare that tightened the knot in my chest. Then I remembered the lessons of the sun and moon faces. Don't charge blindly ahead, and don't let fear hold you back. Their voices a guiding echo in my mind, urging balance. I need a plan, I thought, forcing my racing thoughts to still, seeking clarity amidst the panic. First, what are my advantages? 1. They don't know I am here, my presence a secret cloaked in the shadows. 2. There was no 2. Is that it? I thought, despair creeping in like a cold fog. I am doomed. Oh wait, 2. I can climb, my skill a lifeline in this perilous place. Okay, disadvantages. I can't run fast, my legs are no match for the vast expanse of the kitchen floor. And there is a lot of open ground, a treacherous no-man's land under the wizard's watchful eye. If I'm seen, I'm dead, my small form an easy target. If I'm heard, I'm dead, my footsteps a betrayal on the slick tiles. If Caracas is still in the kitchen, his sleek form lurking in the shadows, I'm dead. If I hide in the nooks and crannies, there may be spiders, their glistening eyes waiting, and I'm dead, ensnared in their silken traps. The odds on death were too great, a towering stack against my survival. I needed to swing them more toward survival, to carve a path through the danger. I need to stay in the open to avoid the spiders, their hairy forms a lurking terror in the dark corners. And I need it to be dark so I can't be seen. The light is my enemy in this exposed terrain. I could remove my shoes so my footsteps wouldn't be heard as I run across the tiled floor, the soft pads of my feet a silent advantage. If I can make it back to the floor mop in the corner, its sodden fibers a familiar refuge. I could scale the handle to the cupboard surface, my climbing skills my greatest asset. Once there, I could see onto the kitchen table and hopefully see Ogleflow, his glass prison a beacon in the chaos. What I would do from there, I didn't know. The path beyond a shadowed unknown, but I'd have to work it out once I reached the cupboard surface, trusting my instincts to guide me. There was one small problem with my plan. How do I extinguish the light, the kitchen's glaring illumination, a relentless foe that threatened to expose my every move? I stuck my head out from under the pantry door, just enough to get a look at the light source, my heart pounding as I exposed myself to the vast, perilous expanse of the kitchen. It was a large candelabra hanging from the center of the ceiling, its wrought iron arms adorned with flickering candles that cast a warm, wavering glow across the tiles. The candelabra was held in place by a thick, coarse rope that extended down, taut and unyielding, and was tied off right by the kitchen cabinet that I needed to climb up to. It's not a mocking beacon just out of reach. I withdrew back under the pantry door, the cold tiles biting into my knees as I retreated into the shadows. Tears formed in my eyes, hot and stinging, as I looked to the heavens, the dim light filtering through the door's gap, casting a feeble halo above. I felt helpless and weak, a small, fragile thing dwarfed by the insurmountable odds, my resolve crumbling under the weight of despair. I couldn't extinguish the light, the candelabra's flames an unassailable fortress of illumination. And even if I could reach the rope at the point where it was tied off, its thick, heavy coils were far too massive for my small hands to move, a cruel reminder of my limitations. There was only one option, and I knew it, a truth that gnawed at my courage. But it took a while before I would admit it to myself, the realization a bitter pill that lodged in my throat. I had to go under the cabinets and face whatever lurks hidden in the dark nooks and crannies, those shadowed recesses where unseen horrors waited. I am not going to lie, as an adult I wouldn't be thrilled with my options, the prospect chilling even a seasoned heart. But as a 10-year-old boy, I was absolutely terrified, my insides twisting with a primal dread that threatened to paralyze me. Hesitantly, I rolled out from under the pantry door, the tiles slick and icy against my bare skin, got to my feet and sprinted barefoot to the nearest cupboard, my heart thundering in my chest. I felt sure I would meet my end at the point of safety, each step a gamble against fate. I even squinted my eyes, bracing for the crushing weight of the wizard's shoe to descend with merciless force. The wizard had been far too busy preparing his experiment, his jerky movements and muttered curses a chaotic symphony at the table, to notice me, my small form slipping beneath his notice. I put my hands together, my fingers trembling, and thanked God, a silent prayer of gratitude for the fleeting mercy. My route was straightforward, no twists, no turns, a direct path through the underbelly of the kitchen's cabinets. The mop that I needed to scale was clearly visible at the other end of the kitchen cupboards, its sodden fibers a distant beacon in the gloom, promising refuge. I would estimate the distance to be around 400 yards, a daunting expanse that stretched like an endless chasm. The light from the kitchen candelabra penetrated roughly halfway under the cupboards, its golden glow fading into a murky twilight. The further back you went, the darker it got, the shadows thickening into an inky blackness that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. If I ran down the light side, I would be in range of Caracas's deadly claws, his sleek form a lurking spectre ready to pounce. I didn't even want to think about what could be lurking in the dark shadows at the back of the cupboards, where the air grew heavy with the musty scent of decay and the faint skitter of unseen things. Before I set off, I took a quick look out from under the cupboard, my breath shallow as I peered into the kitchen's glaring light. There, on the corner of the table, trapped in a glass jar, was Ogleflow, his silhouette a stark contrast against the flickering candlelight. He was still covered with the blue powder that the wizard had blown over him, the shimmering particles clinging to his form like a cursed veil, rendering his usual vibrancy dull and subdued. He had seen me, his eyes locking onto mine with a spark of recognition, and was gesturing wildly, his hands flailing as he pointed to the shelves above my intended destination, urgency etched into every motion. I stretched out my neck a bit further, my muscles tensing, to see what Ogleflow was worried about. my gaze following his frantic pointing. On the bottom shelf was Caracas, curled up asleep, his sleek black form coiled like a spring, his tail hanging down to the cupboard's surface, swaying gently with each slow breath, a silent threat poised to awaken. Auntie M would not allow swearing of any kind at home. Her strict rules were a constant in my mind, but I had heard plenty of rough language while listening outside the Fisherman's Rest, the sailors' colourful curses echoing in my memory. I mouthed every one of those rude words, my lips forming the forbidden syllables with silent vehemence while waving my arms around in frustration, my gestures a futile rebellion against the mounting odds. Ogleflow seemed to find my angry outburst amusing, his laughter bubbling up despite his predicament, his shoulders shaking as he could barely take the time to wave me on, his mirth a stark contrast to the terror gripping my heart, urging me forward with his unshakable confidence. I was still angry as I set off towards the mop, my frustration a smouldering fire in my chest, and believe it or not, the anger suppressed my fear, its heat burning away the icy tendrils of dread that had threatened to paralyze me. I walked down the center line between the light from the kitchen, its golden glow casting harsh shadows, and the dark shadows at the back of the cupboards, where an inky blackness seemed to writhe with unseen menaces. By the time I reached the mop head, my bare feet tingling against the cold tiles, I had calmed down, the anger ebbing into a quiet resolve. I hardly remembered covering the 400 yards from where I started, the journey a blur of determination, as if my body had moved on instinct alone. I pushed my way into the thick, damp mop head, its sodden fibers clinging to my skin with a clammy, mildewed embrace, the dank scent of decay filling my nostrils. I emerged at the base of the handle, the smooth wood looming above like a daunting monolith. This was a long, hard climb out in the open, exposed to the kitchen's glaring light, and I was dreading it, my stomach knotting with apprehension. I didn't even know what I was going to do when I reached the top. I had to trust a solution would present itself once I got there, a leap of faith that felt both reckless and necessary. The broom handle that I scaled in the pantry was dry and rough, its textured surface offering easy grips for my hands. This mop handle, however, was smooth, its polished surface slick with residual moisture, making it difficult to climb, even though it was at a 45-degree angle, a precarious incline that tested my every move. All the same, I made it to the top in good time, my muscles burning with the effort, my breath steady but shallow. I could see Caracas was still asleep, his sleek black form curled tightly on the shelf above, his slow breaths a faint rhythm in the stillness. I gently eased myself onto the flat surface of the cupboard, the cool wood a fleeting comfort beneath my feet, and tiptoed across the surface, my steps silent as I hid behind a jar of green liquid, its contents swirling with an unnatural luminescence that cast eerie reflections across my skin. The kitchen table was on the same level, its scarred surface sprawling before me, and I could finally see what the wizard had been so busy working on, a sight both mesmerizing and foreboding. It was a maze of glass beakers, their delicate forms glinting in the candlelight, all connected by long, sinuous tubes that twisted like the veins of some arcane beast. The beakers were held in place by metal stands with clamps, their cold skeletal frames gleaming with a sterile menace. Naked flames licked around the bottom of the beakers, their flickering tongues casting dancing shadows as they heated various colored liquids, each hue vibrant and otherworldly. The beakers were all connected to one large beaker in the center, a crystalline hub that pulsed with latent power. There were 4 different colors of liquid: red, glowing like molten rubies; yellow, shimmering like liquid sunlight; green, murky as a swamp; and one color I had no name for, an iridescent shade that seemed to shift and writhe, defying description. As the liquids heated, they began to travel along the tubes, their sluggish flow merging in the large central beaker, where they swirled together in a hypnotic dance, releasing faint wisps of acrid vapor that stung my eyes. There was a book of potions lying open on the table, its ancient pages yellowed and curling, inscribed with cryptic symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. If I wanted to read it, I would need to get above it. A daunting prospect that quickened my pulse. I looked across at Ogleflow, trapped in his glass jar, the blue powder still clinging to him like a cursed shroud. He was signaling that I should climb the rope that held the candelabra and look down on the book, his gestures wild and insistent, his eyes alight with that infuriating confidence. I signaled back, "No way," my hands slicing through the air as I pointed at Caracas and the wizard, their looming threats a vivid reality. I didn't understand what good it would do for me to read the book anyway, its arcane secrets far beyond my grasp. I was terrified, my heart hammering against my ribs, while Ogleflow seemed to be having the time of his life, his grin wide and unshakable. I found this very frustrating. The more frantic my signaling became, my gestures sharp with desperation, the more he laughed, his silent chuckles a maddening contrast to my mounting panic. It's funny, as I recall these moments, I can't help but give a little giggle myself, a wry amusement born of hindsight. From a position of safety, it's easy to see the funny side of things, the absurdity of our silent argument under such dire circumstances. I guess Ogleflow knew everything was going to work out, his faith a beacon I couldn't yet see. I wish I shared his confidence. Even today I have doubts, the memory of that fear still sharp in my mind. Eventually I signaled my agreement to Ogleflow, a reluctant acquiescence that felt inevitable, like a tide I couldn't resist. Caracas was still sleeping, his tail twitching faintly, and the wizard was busy monitoring his experiment, his bird-like movements darting between beakers with obsessive focus. So I crept over to where the rope was tied off, its coarse fibers rough against my palms, a stark contrast to the slick mop handle. I took one last look at Caracas. He was fast asleep, his rhythmic breaths a deceptive calm, and I began to climb, my hands gripping the rope tightly. Slowly I edged my way up, each inch a battle against the tremble in my limbs, the candelabra swaying slightly above, its candles casting flickering shadows that danced across the ceiling. I reached the point where I could look down and read the book, its open pages sprawling below like a map to an unknown world, the weight of my mission pressing heavily on my shoulders. There were many words I couldn't pronounce or understand, scrawled in cryptic spidery script across the potion book's yellowed pages. But the images were clear, their vivid illustrations etched with chilling precision. From what I could gather, my heart sinking with dread, the wizard intended to cook Ogleflow in the colored fluids and consume the resulting potion, a grotesque ritual to steal his essence. The thought sent a shiver racing down my spine, the book's dark intent seeping into the air like a malevolent fog. As the colored liquids traveled along the tubes to the large beaker in the center, their vibrant hues, ruby red, molten yellow, swampy green, and that nameless, shifting iridescence, swirling in a hypnotic dance, the wizard became visibly excited. His gaunt frame trembled with manic energy as he watched them mix together, hopping around on his bird-like legs, his bony hands clapping with joy, the sharp sound echoing through the kitchen like the crack of a whip. His close-set eyes gleamed with feverish anticipation, reflecting the flickering candlelight in a way that made them seem almost inhuman. The wizard picked up the jar containing Ogleflow, its glass glinting ominously, and held it up to the light, the candelabra's glow casting eerie shadows that danced across his pallid face. "You see this, Caracas?" the wizard shouted, his shrill voice cutting through the air like a blade laced with triumphant malice. "I'm going to blend this flow-chi into my potion and extract its power. Once consumed, its power will become mine, and I will be free again." His words dripped with a hunger that chilled my blood, each syllable a step toward his dark ambition. The wizard removed the jar's lid with a deliberate twist, the faint scrape of glass against glass amplifying the tension, and tipped Ogleflow out into the hot, bubbling liquid, the beaker's surface roiling with a sinister hiss. I gasped, a sharp intake of breath that betrayed my horror, and quickly covered my mouth with my hand, my fingers trembling as I squeezed my eyes shut in fear of being heard, my pulse hammering in my ears. Slowly, I opened one eye, my vision blurred with panic, and saw the wizard stirring the potion with a long, gnarled spoon. Licking his lips in anticipation, his tongue darting out like a serpent's, his expression one of ravenous glee. The jar that had held Ogleflow captive was on the table, its lid firmly in place, a silent sentinel amidst the chaos. Suddenly there was movement inside, a faint shimmer that caught my eye. "Ogleflow," I thought, my heart leaping with a surge of hope, a spark in the suffocating darkness. The blue powder that had covered him was gone, its shimmering veil dissipated, and he was able to use his camouflage again, his form blending seamlessly with the glass. I have never been able to explain this properly, but I could always see him, and not see him, at the same time, a paradox that defied logic. It was like seeing a white spot on a white background, a subtle shift in perception that revealed his presence. I don't know how, but I could always see him, his familiar silhouette a beacon of reassurance amidst my fear. Ogleflow was jumping up and down in the jar, his movements frantic and urgent, pointing frantically to something behind me, his eyes wide with alarm. I turned to look, my body tensing as a cold dread gripped me. Caracas had seen me, his sleek black form uncoiling on the shelf above, his green eyes glowing with predatory intent as he prepared to pounce, his muscles rippling beneath his glossy fur. Panicked, I began to climb furiously up the rope, my hands burning against its coarse fibers as I hauled myself upward with desperate strength. Caracas jumped, his claws slashing through the air, and the rope started bouncing wildly, a violent pendulum that threatened to shake me loose. I struggled to hold on, my fingers slipping as the rope swayed, each jolt sending a spike of fear through my chest. Glancing back over my shoulder, my breath catching, I saw Caracas hanging on by his claws, his body swaying with the motion as he tried to get a better grip. His eyes locked onto me with unrelenting focus, his tail lashing like a whip. On the shelf where Caracas had leapt from, a bottle he'd knocked over was dripping liquid onto the rope, its viscous contents gleaming with an unnatural sheen. The liquid must have been some kind of acid. It was burning through the rope that held me, Caracas, and the candelabra, the fibers sizzling and fraying with a faint acrid smoke that stung my nostrils. The wizard cursed and screamed at Caracas, his voice a shrill cacophony of rage that echoed through the kitchen as the rope suddenly snapped with a sharp twang, the sound like a breaking bone. The break sent Caracas plummeting straight to the floor, his yowl of surprise cut short by a heavy thud. Me to the tabletop, my body jarring against the scarred wood amidst a shower of glass shards, and the candelabra crashing down with a deafening clang, its iron frame smashing into the wizard's experiment, shattering beakers and sending colored liquids spilling in a chaotic cascade of hissing steam and sparkling fragments. I scrambled to my feet, my knees trembling as I fought to regain my bearings, just in time to see Ogleflow running past me, like a mouse on a wheel inside the overturned jar, his tiny form a blur of motion. He was heading straight towards the edge of the table just as fast as he could go, the jar rolling with reckless speed, its glass glinting in the dim light of the scattered candles. The wizard, stunned by the crashing candelabra, his experiment now a smouldering ruin, quickly fixed his sharp, bird-like eyes on me, their piercing gaze cutting through the chaos like a blade. I bolted after Ogleflow and the jar, my bare feet slipping on the slick tabletop, the spilled potions coating my soles with a sticky residue. The wizard lunged at me, his bony fingers clawing through the air, but he slipped on the spilled liquid and broken glass, his robe flaring as he fell hard, his impact sending a shockwave through the table that rattled the remaining beakers. "Caracas!" the wizard screamed, his voice a raw, desperate bellow that reverberated through the kitchen, as Ogleflow, the jar, and I ran off the edge of the table, the world tilting into a heart-stopping freefall. My descent was slowed by the bag of tricks that I had slung across my back, its fabric billowing out like a parachute, catching the air with a soft whoosh that tugged at my shoulders. I had been so afraid of the wizard, his looming presence a nightmare made flesh, that I hadn't given a second thought to how I was going to land. I just jumped, propelled by instinct and the desperate need to escape, the floor rushing up to meet me in a blur of shadow and light. Ogleflow escaped under the table as the jar shattered into 1,000 pieces upon hitting the floor, the glass exploding in a crystalline cascade that glittered briefly in the dim light, its sharp fragments scattering across the tiles like a deadly mosaic. I had a much softer landing, the bag of tricks billowing out behind me, slowing my descent like a makeshift parachute. As my feet touched the ground, the cold tiles sending a jolt through my bare soles, Ogleflow grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, his grip firm and urgent, and pulled me under the table with a swift tug, just as Caracas, desperately trying to get a grip on the slippery surface, came shooting past, his sleek black form a blur of predatory fury, his claws screeching against the tiles in a frantic bid for traction. The bag of tricks had rolled itself back up, its fabric crinkling softly as it settled firmly in place across my back, a reassuring weight that anchored me amidst the chaos. Ogleflow grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin with unyielding determination, and shouted, "Run!" His voice was a sharp command that cut through the pounding of my heart. To be honest, Ogleflow was running, his lithe form darting forward with effortless grace, while I was being dragged, lifted, pulled and pushed, my body lurching to keep up with his relentless pace. My little 10-year-old legs just couldn't handle the pace, stumbling and flailing as I struggled to match his stride, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my muscles burning with the effort to stay upright. Caracas, having squeezed under the table's bottom shelf, its rusted pots and pans rattling ominously as he brushed past, was hot on our heels, his glowing green eyes piercing the gloom like twin lanterns, his low growl a menacing rumble that vibrated through the air. At the far end, the wizard's face appeared, a ghastly visage framed by the table's edge, his pallid skin taut over sharp bones, his arm outstretched in a futile attempt to catch me, his bony fingers clawing at the air with desperate malice, his bird-like eyes glinting with unhinged rage. Ahead, spilled liquid from the shattered experiment funneled into a small drain, its slick, iridescent surface shimmering in the faint light, a narrow vortex of escape amidst the chaos. Ogleflow, clutching my arm with an iron grip, dove headfirst into it, his body slicing through the liquid with a soft splash, dragging me with him into the cold, slimy depths. As we plunged deeper into the drain, the walls narrowing into a suffocating tunnel of damp stone, I glanced back, my heart hammering in my chest. Caracas's paw, claws outstretched, reached after us, its razor-sharp tips glinting menacingly, but stopped abruptly, as if blocked by an invisible barrier. It withdrew, the motion swift and reluctant, and I watched one of Caracas's glowing green eyes, a malevolent beacon in the shadows, fade away into the darkness, swallowed by the tunnel's inky embrace, leaving only the echo of his frustrated snarl lingering in the air.